Thank you, Rachel.
And you're live.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I am Olivia Pearson and excited to be leading this committee for our June meeting. I would like for everyone to just take a minute to introduce themselves again or say hello. This will also serve as our attendance for the meeting. I will start with the co-chair, if he would not mind.
Thank you, Olivia. Dave Harper, Farm Country, Eastern Shore, and Chesapeake College. Good morning.
Good morning, everyone. Kirkland Murray from Anne Arundel Workforce Development Corporation, representing the Maryland Workforce Association, which is the association of the 13 workforce investment boards throughout the state of Maryland.
Good morning, Robin Warner, Talbot County Public Schools, Career and Technical Education Supervisor.
Good morning, Mike DiGiacomo, Executive Director for the Governor's Workforce Development Board and CTE Committee. Thank you.
Good morning. Good morning. Welcome. And so the first item on our agenda is updates from both the AIB and from the Governor's Workforce Development Board.
Great. So this is Rachel Amstutz. I'm sorry, my camera is not working on my computer today, but I am excited to bring you a couple of quick updates from the AIB. It has been a busy season over at the AIB. So I think when we met last month, we shared with you that we were in the process of reviewing LEA plans. We still are in the process of reviewing LEA plans. The first round has been what MSDE provided to the AIB. We have gone through and completed our revision process and sent out feedback to the LEAs, and we are awaiting the next round, which MSDE plans to have over to us soon. So this process is all working out as expected, with a hope to start beginning the approval process in July. So that is all well underway. The other piece that is well underway is the career counseling MOU and plan review. And our teams between the CTE committee and the AIB, we are working together. We are almost done with all of the MOUs, and we'll be providing feedback very soon. So, very soon. Today, Monday, it's coming. And the process with that will be that if any revisions are required, they will be due back to the AIB by mid-June. And really, we know that as it's written in the law, career counseling begins next school year, and as soon as July hits, really these programs will start to be standard up. And so we're very excited in reading the MOUs to see what has been done already between our local workforce boards, our school systems, and our community colleges. It's very clear that great partnerships have launched quickly to make this law and this aspect of the law come to life for our students in the fall. And we are really excited to see the thinking that's happening around those. The last quick update I have for you is that we're still in a place where a lot of things are just continuing. So the Blueprint Outcome Measures work is still continuing. Twice a month we meet. The ultimate goal is that there will be some updates to the Blueprint Comprehensive Plan that will be recommended and hopefully approved by August 1st. It will not be enormous updates. The enormous lift was writing that initial Blueprint Comprehensive Plan and then getting all of the state agency and LEA plans. Really, we envision that maybe some metrics will be done and ready to share, but maybe not. That might take longer to get them right. But then also there's just a few tweaks that we learned along the way, either changing report due dates or adding some things that need to be done, but it will not be like another 200 pages that we all need to go through. It'll be some minor tweaks and things that we've learned. So those are really the updates that I have for you. Are there any questions for me?
I do have a question, and it's about the feedback on the career counseling MOUs.
Yes.
I've gotten some different questions about that. And so I think initially, because the LEAs have not received the feedback yet, the follow-up as it relates to the June 16th, is that a signed, updated MOU by then?
Great question. So we recognize that, you're working with 3 partners and you've got a legal document that you're working on. What I can tell you that might answer the question a little bit better is that there are, I think, 21 areas on our rubric that we're looking at in the plan. For example, one of them is all 3 partners are represented in this agreement. So I think pretty much everybody got that one. But it's that level. But then it also gets into the financial aspect, and it gets into a little bit of the programming. Are you looking at middle and high school? Those sorts of things. The feedback, there will be places where we just said, hey, this met the expectation or it partially met, but we don't need you to revise. We just want you to keep thinking. And what we did was we will be setting up more in-depth individual meetings with each collection of people representing one county in the fall. So what you'll see is keep thinking about this and we're going to talk in the fall. There are a few things, like if the fiscal things were not ironed out yet, if they weren't detailed, or if we were confused, we weren't quite sure what was going on, there are only a handful of things that we will say revisions needed. So those, we don't anticipate that they're going to be really difficult. We needed more clarification or an additional document. But the June 16th is kind of, if you were part of the LEA process with the reviews of those plans, it's kind of like add additional information, provide this. It shouldn't be terribly complicated. We are requesting a copy of your signed MOU when it's signed. So if it's not signed by June 16th, no problem. If it's not signed by July 1, that's actually even okay, with the assumption that the work is beginning, that we're standing up these programs come July. So I hope that answers, but no, it doesn't have to be signed, but we will get a copy when it is signed. And the real meat and potatoes, what we recognized was we met February 7th or something with everybody and gave a whole lot of info to everybody on one call. And then your MOUs were due draft by March 15th. Not a lot of time. So folks were focusing on the legal and the financial aspects. And now that we've gotten closer to implementation, we're talking about programming. We're talking about the who and the what and the how. So by fall, we'll be able to dig deeper. We know that those are started, but we'll be able to meet individually. So no pressure to get them signed, no pressure to be finalized, but really kind of tell us what you're thinking so we know that you're addressing this component and that all 3 agencies are in agreement.
So I have one last follow-up question about that, because the funding, I think, is a bigger deal for some areas than others, depending
Absolutely.
on how your MOU is structured and which institution is taking the brunt of the fiscal responsibility
Yes.
as it relates to implementation. And so that's been an ongoing question in our meetings as to exactly how will the funding come to LEAs. Is it coming in one lump sum July 1, and then we just give everyone their portion, and also the subsequent auditing responsibilities that, because the information is coming through the LEAs, may also be part of the responsibility of the LEA. And so if you have any clarity on that, that would help us tremendously.
Yes. So Olivia, you're a little bit over my head on a little bit of this. So if Mike has anything to add, or even Kirk, I would appreciate it. But what I can tell you is our executive director, Rachel Heiss, has been in the meetings with the CFOs regularly, and this has been a topic at the weekly Thursday meetings. So pulling in CFOs would be really great because they've been given the best guidance. And so we did receive some financial questions in the updated FAQs that we're working to get out very soon. So we'll be getting that out to you. I'm not comfortable with being able to specifically explain all of the where it shows up and how it comes, if it's in the bi-monthly disbursements, that kind of a thing. We did see differences across the state and how people are doing it. In some cases, that was a question we're bringing back just to say, can you clarify this for us? And are all three parties in agreement? But I think the best thing to do would be to reach out to your CFOs, have that conversation with the information that's come from MSDE and Rachel Heiss at those meetings. And then if there are any questions, pull us in. So email me if you need me to get an answer, we will get an answer for folks. And then the FAQs should be out hopefully next week that answer a few more questions. Kirk or Mike, anything to add, or does that sound okay? Okay.
So to kind of pick up on Olivia's question, I mean, it's my understanding that the LEAs get their allocations bi-monthly.
Correct.
And I know the conversations, again, I'm just speaking about the conversations that we've had in Anne Arundel. When they get their allocations, they will give the local board their allocation. So we're expecting to get bi-monthly allocations based on the budget that we have agreed on.
Yes.
You know, and Rachel, please feel free to correct me if I'm saying this incorrectly, but the way I interpret the law was that the money is to go to the local workforce boards by that formula of $62 per registered student. And so what we've been looking at this in Anne Arundel County, we calculate that to be a little over $5 million. But we know that our LEA is going to need some funding on their side to operate Blueprint or implement Blueprint. So instead of them giving us the money and then us giving back the money, what we've said is, let us know what you need and you keep that, and then, you know, the rest of the money comes over to a local board. We're creating a budget, detailed budget on what the local board will be spending the money on, what the LEA will be spending the money on, and if any money goes to the community college. So that would be our kind of our funding agreement on that. But, you know, based on what the money that the amount that's coming over to the local board, what our agreement says is that we would get bi-monthly allocations on that. So,
Kirk, everything you said, I think, is spot on. Some districts are doing it a little bit differently, but I do think it's fair to say that the preferred way, like we're not going to dictate it, but the preferred way is that it's seen as just a fixed sum to implement this program that is sent over every 2 months, that, you know, everybody has to do their due diligence in accounting for the money, and it has to be allowable expenses, which we've provided that chart, and you have to be able to prove, you have to have receipts, you know, but the idea is that the local workforce boards are really bearing the brunt of the startup of this, but it's whatever the three agencies have agreed to. And so I think it makes a lot of sense to not bounce money back and forth, you know, like over and over, to the extent that we can. It's a first year of starting up a program. I've seen a lot of draft budgets that are really making sense. But I think that's the intent, because we recognize that our local workforce boards, this is a big new thing. It's a big new thing, and they do need the funds to get it going. That said, it is an agreement between the three agencies. And so again, if there's any problems, any questions, any clarifications needed, feel free to reach out to me and I'll pass it to the right people, and we can help get that answered as quickly as possible.
Do we know when the first draw will be?
I believe it's July. Kirk, does that sound right? Mid-July?
Sounds, well, we've been told it's the beginning part of July. Yes.
Okay.
So, but kind of tie this back to the MOU. So what I've heard you say today, and what we've had other conversations, is that the MOU does not need to be signed by July 1st.
Correct.
But then again, does that MOU need to be in place before the funds can be transferred among the partners?
Oh, Kirk, we're in a little bit of murky land here. So what needs to happen is this program's got to get off the ground. And we recognize that everybody's working out on the MOUs. They're getting them done. The intent of giving the time, you know, to say it's not July 1 is because it wasn't in the statute. It wasn't in the law that says July 1, the MOU has to be signed. But we all need to be operating towards the understanding that the program has to get started. And in order to get started, things have to happen in the summer. We have to get people hired. We have to buy things. Things have to get started. So I'm not going to say too much more, but I
Okay,
think
all
that
right.
we're
And,
all on the same page,
right,
that
right.
money has to flow to get things started. So the sooner we get that MOU ironed out, the better. But I guess that's up to financial and legal people about, I mean, the money's coming from the state and it's got to get to the right people to be able to get the program off the ground for our kids.
Yeah, and there's been some interpretation that the money was to flow even if the MOU was not in place. Back to the MOU again. Far as the update on the MOU, it seems like you guys have reviewed this, and for basic things like financial compliance, that all three partners, and it looks like that most of them are conforming to those things. It seems like that where there may be a little bit more, where you're asking for a little bit more feedback, is more on the implementation part of this. Because I can tell you right now, from a local area, we have been mostly focusing on that legal side, how the money is going to work,
Right.
the partner's going to get all that. We have not dived really, really deep. We just started in the implementation. So would you guys accept in the MOU language that an implementation plan will be created as an amendment to this MOU that will be agreed upon by all three partners? And that will be enough to get the MOU signed right now.
Yeah.
And then in that time period that you say, maybe say in September or August, we will have to have you an implementation plan.
Yes. And I think the caveat would be most of the things implementation related were listed as no revision needed, but please think about this or this and be ready to talk about it in the fall, that kind of a thing.
Right.
The caveat would be if a plan did not specifically mention middle and high school students, we might have asked for a clarification to say, hey, we want to make sure that both students are represented here. A lot of the things that we're asking for a revision, it might be a clarification, on something in there. These are not going to take a long time. And I don't think that they're going to be like a sticking point of agreement between the three. It's, can you add middle school in there too? Can you clarify? And then anything programmatic, we know that people weren't able to submit the program plans because they hadn't started that by March, or even by, when they submitted an updated MOU. That absolutely will be the topic of the fall meeting when we meet with each group. And we gave hints in the memo that we sent out yesterday, and also in the what will come out in the feedback, to say, like, specifically be ready to talk about this. What we focused on in the MOU review was truly, are you meeting the law? Or is this agreement complying with what the law says to stand up a program and get it off the ground? So there's 3 questions related to the finance. There's some questions that say, like, did you identify who's hiring the career coach? Like, is there a process? We don't care who it is, but is it called out and is it clear? And so things like that, some places weren't there yet, they didn't have that in there. Some LEAs did have a draft position description, some didn't. And so it's really those legal aspects that we were taking a look for to make sure we're ready to go by July. The implementation stuff is really going to be a little bit down the road. And I guess the biggest piece I would say is that, again, if anybody is stuck, or if there's a sticking point, or if clarification is needed, don't hesitate to reach out. Like, we're happy to support that. And we can only help if we know what's going on. So we really appreciate people letting us know if there is something that needs clarification. And to that point, the question form that we opened is still open. So anytime you submit a question to that form, if it's one that's like for everybody, not just for your LEA, I get an alert in my email, I work to get an answer, and then we work to get that answer back to folks. So either way works, individual or whole group questions.
Sounds good.
Thank you. That has been increasingly helpful.
Good.
All of the above, all the dialogue this morning, I think has been helpful. And thank you. Thank you for those updates.
You bet. And a huge thank you out to everybody. We recognize this has been a lift, and we're very appreciative of all the hard work, the working it out, the coming into a new partnership and what's to come for our students.
So Rachel, I said this to you yesterday, so I want to say this, and since we're in a public forum now, that I just want to give a big thanks on the behalf of the workforce development directors in the state of Maryland, all the support that the AIB has given us. I think you guys have been very responsive and very clear in communication on what we need to do. So I just we deeply appreciate that. We know that, you know, our section, or this career counseling section is a very important section of Blueprint, but it is one section of Blueprint. You guys are dealing with the all 5 pillars and all the other different sections. But you guys have really been very helpful in helping us and guiding us, and coming in as needed when we've been stuck in the negotiations. But we deeply appreciate that.
We appreciate that as well. Thank you very much. And we very much value the partnership. It's been really great to watch this grow and get it off the ground.
And I think the good thing is, yes, the Blueprint has so many different areas. I've started talking about career counseling with some of our high school and middle school counselors, and everyone is just excited about it. And so that's what I think has been so well received, is the excitement that I have experienced as I've been talking about this with different stakeholder groups.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome.
And so Mike and Kirkland, do you have any updates to share with us? I know you guys had a meeting the other day. I was fortunate enough to kind of peek in for the first 20-30 minutes. So we'd love to hear updates that you may have.
Sure. First, I'd like to point out that Kirk and I are actually representing our baseball football teams today. And we didn't do it on purpose, but I know they're purple and orange, and it's kind of a casual Friday here at the state office. So I just wanted to point that out. A couple of updates. We had a great meeting. It was really an update meeting. A couple important pieces that I'll just point out, that the CTE committee is working really, really closely with MSDE. And there's a piece of legislation that says that the CTE committee and MSDE need to collaborate on a Perkins to administer Perkins MOU. We are on our way to making that happen. It is in MSDE legal. It'll be into our legal next week, we just heard, but that's kind of due July the 1st. So I will say, for anybody that's listening, that we have a really close working relationship with our partners at MSDE. And not only are we working with them on this MOU, but we've all agreed that we are going to incorporate all the work that we are doing into the Perkins State Plan, right? Which is a really important part. So it's not like we're going to have a CTE plan, that we're going to be, kind of doing it without MSDE. They're willing to incorporate a lot of what we're talking about into the Perkins State Plan, so that when we talk to people, we're kind of talking with one voice. And that doesn't mean that we won't have disagreements. It doesn't mean that, everything's going to be perfect, but it will say that we are in partnership, much like we are in partnership with the local directors on the workforce side. We are going to be in lockstep with MSDE, because we think from a messaging perspective, it is really, really important to be there. So that was a big piece of it. From the MSDE CTE committee side, was that we will have an MOU by July 1st by statute, and that we are working with them on the Perkins State Plan, number one. Number two, the other important piece, I think, is that after a conversation with Dave Harper, we have getting a better handle on working with our community colleges and where the community colleges fit into the CTE plan. So Dave has kind of got us connected, because one of the things that we really want to do is incorporate the community college expertise into the CTE plan. Because of timing, we really didn't do a great job of that, I would say, on the front end. We did on the baseline foundation, but now we want to really get in and kind of figure out where do the community colleges fit into this MSDE, CTE plan? What can they deliver? Where do we, and we're looking at it from the broad perspective, not just today, but looking out. How do we do instruction? And are there ways to incorporate community colleges? So we are going to continue to have that conversation. I have a meeting with them, I guess, in 2 weeks to have at least those initial conversations. They've looked at our plan and make some comments that we will incorporate into that. So that's another part of this conversation. I think it's all about messaging out for all of us to everybody that we are all working together. And if we're not, it's not by design. And if you have not been included and would like to be included in conversation, as Kirk says, and Olivia says, please reach out to us and we will find ways to get you incorporated. That was the other update. And the other update was that the CT committee sent a letter and got a motion to approve to send a letter to the AIB to ask for an extension on the expert review team plan that was due July 1st. We asked for an extension until September 1st. So we've sent that out, got approval from our committee and approval there. We are working on a plan. We should have a pilot. What we've agreed to do is to have a pilot plan in place by September 1st. So that's what we are working towards. But because of the short notice of getting people on staff and everybody else connected, we did ask for that extension, and hopefully that will be granted by the AIB. And then I think the last piece that's of importance is that we did put together a system for community feedback. So if there are questions that came out of the meeting or people just randomly have questions, that we have a system in place on our website to address those questions, that we are keeping track, and that we will get back to folks with questions either at our next meeting or before our next meeting. But it is a mechanism that we did put out to the public, that if people have questions on the CTE plan, to please reach out, let us know, and we will work with our partners to be able to get those answers to you as quickly and efficiently as possible. And I think that was the highlights. Oh, I forgot the other highlight. My friends Kirk and Brandon gave an update on the career counseling, which is really important, right? Again, I think, I can't say it enough. I think this is all about folks like ourselves, yourselves. It's about messaging. Like, we all have to be working together to be able to have the same message going out, because there will be miscommunications where people hears things out. They need to just bring it, as you said, Olivia, bring it to the table, and that we will help clarify any questions that people have. Some we don't have. There's some things that we just don't have answers for yet, but that we are working on. So thank you for all the work that you guys do. Again, in collaboration with the committee, we look forward, and the AIB, we look forward to working with you to kind of hit the ground running and keep this thing going. So thank you much for your time as well.
Thanks, Mike. And just to note that, your updates are really well integrated, because Perkins and Blueprint, they already have a lot of overlap. And Richard Kincaid, and he's been working with us on our application, Chesapeake College's community college application for Perkins for next year. It was one of the simplest applications we've ever done, because the end goals were threaded together between what we're doing with Blueprint and what we're doing with our LEA partners, which happened to be 5 in our case. So just appreciated the kind of amplified partnerships that we got going on. And speaking of that, the community college academic officers are excited to receive you in a couple of weeks. And they've already got a sheet of bulleted feedbacks on each of the tasks that's listed in the CTE plan. So just it'll be a starting ground for conversation, but just being in the same room, not something we did all the time before, is going to be, I think, productive.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. And just another shameless plug, the Governor's Workforce Development Board has a meeting next Wednesday at 3:30. And I tell you that because we are going to have folks from the Swiss Embassy talk about and give a brief presentation, but more discussion around the Swiss model of apprenticeship at that meeting. If anybody is interested, has not yet received an invite, would like to get an invite, please let me know. It is both in person at the Community College of Baltimore County, Catonsville campus, as well as a virtual link as well. So if anybody's interested, let me know, but as you reach out, I'm more than happy to connect.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo Dave's point. I mean, speaking from the CTE supervisors and directors across the state, we really appreciate, we had meeting a few months ago, and it just felt like we had some collaboration, and we're starting to really see where the plan was going for us when it came to Perkins, because I know there was a lot of anxiety as we were trying to write 2 grants at the same time and also plan for Blueprint. So I felt like Mr. Kincaid coming in has really been helpful, and having that conversation with your team, Mike. So yeah, so speaking as a CTE supervisor, I appreciate it. I did want to ask, do you know where the CTE committee is when it comes to the standard setting that's mentioned in the implementation plan? I know that part of the goal is to have, if I'm understanding correctly, have it so that if a student is doing a program, no matter where they're doing that program in Maryland, that there are common standards and benchmarks that we're working on, which I think is great. Because I do think that helps us for being able to speak with our employers and apprenticeship partners, that no matter where they're coming from, this is what the expectation is. But do you know like where we're at with that, if that's something that will be worked on soon? I know that that's a lot of planning, but on our end, we're just trying to make sure that we support that, when it comes to curriculum planning with our staff.
Absolutely. So the answer is we are knee deep in the planning part of it. We're looking for, so we do have Judy Emmel from NSA is the chair of that committee. And we are working with partners to figure out who has done this before, so that we're not going into, territory that we have to recreate the wheel. So we are working with partners to help bring that in. We are working to determine also with those with kind of those consulting partners, who the best people have to be at the table specifically, and then how do we reach back out to them, right? We can't have 100 people at the table, but we know because of all the different sectors and all different standards. So we are actively working on that. I suspect that over the next 30 to 60 days, we will have kind of a plan in place of where we are going to go and how we are going to get there. But our expectation, one way or another, everybody will be at that table to determine what are the standards that are going to be required.
Okay, thank you. That's great.
And I'm sorry, Kirk, I'm going to help give you another shameless plug. But we did talk to MSDE today, and so the local, Kirk, you might want to talk a minute about it. We gave them the opportunity to come to Raising the Bar, which is the opportunity that the local workforce boards have. I'll let Kirk give the 30-second version, but just so you know, I did talk to Dr. Collins and Richard Kincaid this morning. We talked to them about getting CTE directors, LEAs, people connected to that. They are going to reference it. They are going to socialize it out because I do think it's a great forum to be able to get the education folks, whoever they might be, with the local directors in a forum to be able to listen, start building relationships, and learn from each other in how we do that. So just so you know, if you hear Raising the Bar and it comes out, I did send over to them the initial flyer with information on it. So if you hear it, that's what it is. Dr. Collins and Richard Kincaid have agreed that they will socialize it out. But I think that it's a really great opportunity in September to bring CT directors, LEAs, and anybody in the school system together with the workforce for 1 day or 2 days to kind of come together and be in the same room. Kirk, I'll give you I'm sorry, Olivia, you're about 30 seconds if you'd like to do the Raising the Bar pitch.
Absolutely. I heard about it for the first time, I think this morning at our local meeting when we met with our workforce development board. So I think this is a perfect opportunity. Kirk, if you don't mind.
Sure. Well, thank you. And thank you both, Olivia and Mike, for this opportunity. So Raising the Bar is a conference that the Maryland Workforce Association puts on every year. Again, the Maryland Workforce Association is the association of the 13 local workforce boards throughout the state of Maryland. This year, with Blueprint being such a big focus on this, we really want to dedicate that, this conference to Blueprint. With all the new career counselors coming on board, it's a great opportunity for them to learn from each other, meet each other, network, and get some training. But the real focus that we're putting on is our pre-conference is really going to deal with totally Blueprint. The AIB has been helping us come up with the concept for this convening. And the goal is to, as Mike says, to bring the LEAs, the local boards, the community college, everyone together to hear best practices all in one place, all at one time. We're looking at starting the morning with, hopefully the AIB will be there to kind of talk about where we are with Blueprint and their vision for career counseling. And then we're looking at doing finding a vendor or someone to do some training around career counseling, bringing in best practices from other places throughout the country so that we can get some good ideas on how to implement career counseling here in Maryland. Then we would have lunch. As Mike mentioned, he has the Swiss Embassy coming into his Governor's Workforce Board meeting next week. We're hoping to have the Swiss Embassy as our keynote speaker at lunch to kind of share about what they're doing in Switzerland around apprenticeships and career counseling. The afternoon will be more geared towards youth registered apprenticeships, making sure that everyone's on the same page on what we mean by a registered youth apprenticeship program. Again, we're looking at bringing in a subject matter expert that can share best practices throughout the country on youth registered apprenticeships. So the whole purpose of this is to bring everyone together, get them excited, get some good ideas out there, get them really jazzed up about how to go implement this. We've been spending the last year learning about this, putting MOUs together, talking about this. This is an opportunity to kind of make that pivot to, okay, let's now implement this and let's bring in some best practices around implementation of both career counseling and registered youth apprenticeship. So we're very excited about it. Mike, thank you very much for promoting this to MSDE, because we really think that the only way this is going to be successful if all the partners are in the room. One last thing is that one of the things I'm very excited about is the partnerships that have come out of Blueprint. CTE has always been a partner on the local workforce board, but this has brought us a lot closer. Working with the Association for the CTE Directors, MWA, we've created a great partnership. I know that they have a meeting in July, and they've asked the local boards to present on what a local board is and what we're doing at that meeting. I think if they attend the Raise the Bar conference, that would just more putting that, helping to bridge that partnership together. So, Blueprint has been a lot of things, but it's definitely allowed us to really strengthen the partnerships that we have throughout the state of Maryland.
Can you restate the dates of the conference,
Sure.
please?
Sure, I left out the most important part. So the pre-con will be on September the 11th, and then the conference is a 2-day conference where we have career counseling as one of the tracks. So again, we're encouraging, especially those new career counselors, that will be the 12th and the 13th. So it's a 3-day conference with the 1-day pre-con. It's going to be at Maryland Live in Hanover, Maryland. We will be opening up registration very soon. So we'll make sure that we get the links out for people to register for both the pre-con and the conference.
And this is something that we could bring like our teams, like I could bring our school to career coordinator and when we hire our career counselors and things like that. Okay.
Yes. Matter of fact, we really encourage that, especially the career counselors, the new career counselors coming on board. This is a great opportunity for them to start getting training in workforce development. What we do is that we have both, one of the things that we're featuring, we're going to have some businesses there that are talking about, new growing industries and what it's really like to be in their industry. So it's a great opportunity for all of us to learn together.
I think it would also be something wise to send out to our local, like county council and our local, like chamber of commerce, like all of those organizations that, they have a part in our planning and our funding and, to see how it works so that every LEA could be best supported. So I plan on for Talbot sending this out. Thanks for putting the link in there, Dave.
Yeah, I'm capturing this and all these announcements best I can, and revisions welcomed on our shared minutes, which we'll share out by email at the end of this, so you can just copy paste that and shoot it to your peers, your colleagues.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I actually had heard of the conference. I just didn't know the name. So this is great. Another update, and I don't know if Rachel would be able to give any additional information, but at the MSDE meeting, I want to say it was last week on the 23rd, there was an update regarding preliminary results regarding the feedback on the CCR metric for our students that, again, is directly related to our pillar. And so we are supposed to get updated metrics in the fall. However, there was a preliminary share out during the last MSDE meeting.
So I heard that too. Basically what was shared at the MSDE meeting would be what I know at this point. I don't have any additional information right now, but we will pass it along as soon as we do.
Got it. And so I think we've been able to get some of the initial information. And so I think in our future meetings, we can absolutely share that out, and we can have some dialogue in our
Yes.
future meetings regarding this preliminary information that was shared.
Perfect.
Can you share that with our team, Olivia, on this call?
I absolutely can. I have not yet, but I absolutely will after this call.
Thank you, Olivia.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, we have had very robust discussion just in our updates. And so we've got 14 minutes in our agenda to really dig in. And so the next item for potential discussion is any feedback on implementation plans. So we already started talking about that briefly. So I don't know if there's anything else anyone wants to share before we move on to.
I have a question about that, if I may, Olivia. I didn't mean to cut you off. Olivia, can I
You are
finish?
fine.
Sorry. Just a case in point. So with the implementation plans, Chesapeake, for example, is working with 5 counties, and we've enjoyed really good collaboration, maybe because we typically do on a number of different points already. We're used to working together. They differ somewhat, that's fine. But as I've talked to some of my colleagues throughout the state, and it's true in rural areas too, resources, right? So in some cases, the plans are limiting or putting cautious qualifiers around things like transportation, where resources may be limited, or around the types of classes, dual enrollment classes that students can take, because the concern is, well, an unlimited ability for a high school student to register for dual enrollment courses could be, counter to their academic plan. Or could just be impossible for the LEA to afford. So again, within the context of good collaboration, and we've been happy and been able to work all those things out for our group, when those LEA plans differ in terms of limits for transportation or limits for courses, or in terms of, hey, we've got resource needs, how will we going forward just kind of make these incremental adjustments year after year? What is the AIB's ability to kind of work with LEAs and MSDE to iron these wrinkles out, which we're gonna inevitably face? Does that make sense, Robin? I'm sorry, Olivia.
No, I'm glad you
Yeah.
brought that up, because I think a lot of us have the same questions as it relates to resources and funding, because the blueprint specifies that we are going to pay for every aspect for students to participate in, not just dual enrollment, but AP courses, IB, CTE program pathways, that if there is a budget shortfall, how is that going to be addressed?
Is that one for me?
I think if you could give
let's-
some, if you
yeah.
have any feedback, maybe.
So I don't have much, but what I can tell you, just big picture, is that the blueprint is going to require reviewing monies being spent currently and potentially reallocating things, changing the way we use current money. So new money is coming, and you're seeing a lot of it. There's a lot of new money that comes with blueprint. But at the same time, we're not asking districts to do what they were doing and more. We're asking people to rethink what we do, that in order to transform education in Maryland, it's not do more, it's do different, and hopefully, do better, that we're growing as the world is changing, technology is changing, students are changing, that we may need to let go of some old things, and we may need to shift or upgrade or change or operate differently, and I think it'll be fascinating to see how AI impacts us in education and all of that. But as we make these changes, we may see that funds have to be used differently. And so that's one of the big things we need everybody to look at. We need to critically look at everything currently budgeted and decide if some of that money shifts over to fund some of the new things that Blueprint is funding, because if you pull out the funding formulas, it's in there. But we just have to really look at everything and really take a critical look at all monies. And then I think the AIB has made a strong commitment from day one that we're going to give it our all to implement the blueprint as written. If and when we hit any bumps, whether that's in programming or in funding programming, we have to figure it out when we get there. But first we need to try. And so I think it's kind of a combination of both of those two things, that we take a close look at what we're doing and how we're spending money and maybe make some changes. And then also that we stay in close touch with the districts and everybody involved in implementing Blueprint, and that we collaborate and we creatively look for solutions of how to move forward. And that if there's a need, or if we're coming into things where we're like, oh, we didn't know about this, or, as we implement the law, we realize it means this, this, and this. So we all are kind of growing and learning through this process. So we need to collaborate and stay in touch to understand the challenges and be willing to make some changes.
Thank you. I don't know if Robin, did you want to add?
I think the concern from the LEA's perspective is, and this is inevitable, I mean, it's with transition, right? Like there's going to be bumps along the way, but we are kind of living in two worlds of having to shift to the new, but then also being held accountable for the old at the same time when it comes to COMAR and graduation requirements. So we're living in this world where we kind of do have to be able to fund both at the same time when it comes to certain areas. And I know one major concern is, we have to, by law, being able to increase our salaries. And for some districts, that is a bigger jump than others, depending on how they were supported financially by their counties. And Dave can probably speak to this too on the shore, because he works with 5 different counties that have 5 different, very different funding sources of what's available to them by the state and by their local government, and how much the local government supports them and what they're able to provide. And when we are having to also be mandated to increase certain things, there is a concern of what do we cut out that we also are supposed to be doing in the meantime, before Blueprint can force that change that you're referencing, Rachel. Like, I totally agree that it's going to make us shift our priorities for the better. But I think as an LEA, we have to make sure we do all the things that we're supposed to do with the money that we have at that time. So what do we do when we have a student who is signing up for every dual enrollment, and that we have to pay for it, and also providing transportation, all these things that we're afraid of, things that we weren't accounting for, and making sure we can support them the way we're supposed to by law. So I think that like this next year, so is going to be that transition, and hoping that we cover our basis and we're able to provide that. And then we're going to learn from it of how that needs to be budgeted. But I think that a prime example that I always think of with this, with formulas, is that, and I'm not a CFO, I'm not a math person, but just from working with my colleagues, for example, the funding when it comes to career counseling. We were sitting in a room with all of the CTE directors a few months ago. We all have very different problems. Like you could talk to a larger county, they're trying to hire 25. I'm trying to hire 2, but then my colleague in Kent County, it's not enough money for him maybe to even hire a person for it, right? So that although we want some consistency, I think we're going to learn along the way that maybe some of that needs to be adjusted in different counties, and maybe having that figure of $62, it might not work for every county. And I know that that's legislation, but these are things that are going to come up when you're crossing county lines and you have a county like Kent County that is so small that it's not enough money for them to even hire a person potentially, but then you come over to Talbot and we're going to have possibly 2. And that's just one example where we have all these formulas so that we have things that are consistent, but I think along the way, we're finding out that maybe some of that needs to be adjusted, and that's good because it's going to fix things for us, and Blueprint is going to force that. It's just that immediate, like that transition period, I think that causes LEAs to have a little concern and anxiety because we have to make sure we're doing it correctly.
Robin, I think you said that perfectly. I really do. And I think that it kind of goes back to something Kirk said earlier, that really we're all in this together. It's a joint partnership and nobody stands alone. And that's kind of the beauty of the Blueprint, this that we're all collaborating a lot more. So I think everybody needs to raise those concerns as they're seeing them arise, and then we work together to figure out what we need to do. So I know the example you shared with Kent, that came to our attention yesterday as well, so we're figuring things out as we get there. And we're committed to working through it. So if you hear about concerns that are bubbling over, please let us know so that we can do digging and get a broad sense of how it's impacting where and what we need to do to help.
And it's interesting from the community college perspective. We look at it through what is the balance? Like we're starting to ask ourselves, because we're talking about our conversations as individual institutions with different LEAs throughout the state, with very different geographic and economic realities and workforce realities. We start to ask, like, what is the right balance between consistency of programming and opportunities for high schoolers and middle schoolers statewide, and local control? Because each LEA looks at it through the unique lens of their local industry and their resources. And so finding that balance is going to be a lot of the conversation.
It is. I think there's a lot of work to do. I know we're a large county, but that also means there are more layers as well. And so there are different challenges. It's like you have this cruise ship and you want to kind of move it. It takes a little bit more than if it was a speedboat in different ways, And even with access to colleges, like we have students, let's say, who are local community college, who we love and have a great working relationship with. It may be closer for them to go to another county to participate in dual enrollment versus doing it, let's say, at the local community college. And then what does that mean for funding? Because, the colleges are then charging out of county fees. And so what does that look like? And so I think there's a lot that we still are working with to see how we're going to meet the needs of all of our students.
I think that in the end, that the way that we will be most successful with all of this is if we treat LEAs and their goals the way that the Blueprint wants us to treat students, and that's having overall goals, right? So like our overall goal for students is to be CCR, and we're going to have a definition of broadly what CCR means, but then we're going to have plans for students, right, to get CCR, and it's going to look differently, and they have different pathways after getting CCR and going through one of the 3 post CCR, right? Like that works for that student. I think that MSCE and AID and CT committee, if LEAs could be viewed that way as well, of having an overall plan of we want students in your LEA to be able to leave this way, but we're going to give you some options to get there that works best for your demographics and for your workforce development board and for your LEA and your funding. And it's not just the same across the board, that's where this plan will be most successful.
Yeah, so one of the things I like about the blueprint, and one of the things that I believe that the AIB has said, or at least I've heard them say, is local flexibility. So you know what's going to happen in Anne Arundel isn't necessarily what's going to happen in Talbot County, things like that. And you have to take in consideration all those things that you brought up, Robin. You know, local funding, and you know, barriers to doing some of these things. Transportation. I mean, you know, transportation is a barrier here in Anne Arundel County, but I'm sure it's a greater barrier in, you know, in a rural area and stuff like this. So just keeping that flexibility in mind, knowing that we all have a common goal, but how we may get there different ways, but we all have a common goal. It's
Right.
something that I think we just need to keep in mind.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, we are actually at the end of our time. And so I think we will communicate regarding our next meeting. Thank you all for the robust discussion. And clearly, we basically spent our entire hour on updates and a little bit of discussion. So clearly there's a lot of work. There's
Just
a lot of
yeah,
work
what's going
to
on,
do. Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you all and have a great weekend, and we will see you next time.
All right, thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.